this chapter, we'll look at the periodic table and all the substances that can be found on it. The periodic table is a diagram made up from about 100 chemicals. The diagram is very carefully arranged, as we'll see.
The chemicals found on the periodic table are called elements, and all known substances are made from these 100 or so elements. An element can be defined as a substance made up from one type of atom. This means that all the individual particles that make up the substances are all the same. To understand what an element is, you also need to know the definition of an atom. Atoms are the simplest particles that a substance can be broken down into. Imagine you had a small lump of gold. Now imagine you had a knife that could cut the gold. If you kept cutting your piece of gold into smaller and smaller pieces, eventually you'd get the tiniest piece of gold imaginable that simply couldn't be cut any smaller. This would be an individual atom of gold.
Now we'll go back to look at how the elements are arranged in the periodic table. If you look at a diagram of the periodic table, the elements that are metals are found on the left-hand side, and the non-metals are on the right-hand side. There's a clear dividing line between the two types of elements. This dividing line looks a bit like a staircase. It starts between aluminium and boron, and then continues in a zigzag pattern between aluminium and silicon, silicon and germanium and arsenic. This line is usually marked on versions of the periodic table. It's easy to tell if an unfamiliar element is a metal or a non-metal from looking at which side of the line it's found.
The divide between metals and non-metals is not the only bit of organisation found in the periodic table. If you look at the vertical columns, they're formed from elements that have similarities in the way that they react. These columns are called groups. You'll need to be able to identify some of the groups and the elements found in each group.
Begin on the left-hand side of the periodic table with the first column. This is group 1, also called the alkali metals. These elements are lithium, sodium, potassium, rubidium and cesium. Now let's move across the table to the middle section. This is the largest group of elements and is known as the transition metals. Most of the common metals are found here, such as iron, copper, gold, silver and zinc. You'll also need to know about two groups of non-metals, which are found in the last two columns of the periodic table.
The last but one column contains the elements fluorine, chlorine, bromine and iodine. This is group 7, which is also known as the halogens. The final column of the periodic table is group 0, which is also known as the noble gases. The elements in group 0, such as neon, argon and helium, are the least reactive elements known. They hardly react with anything at all.